Good, just go now.
Recording.
Oh, cool. Can I start? Does that work?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Are
Okay.
you gonna share your screen though?
Yeah, I'll share my screen. Da-na-na-na. Okay. Awesome. Okay. Let's see. Present. Can everyone see my screen? Hello?
Yep, looks good.
Yes?
Yep.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you. And then stop me if you have any questions throughout this. Yeah, just stop me if anything seems confusing or you need clarification or stuff like that. Okay, so test plans, all about it. So really where this all started was on a playbook actually in Confluence. So I went the other way around. So I started with the playbook, hashed all of that out, talked to people, gathered a bunch of knowledge. And then from there, I decided to make this presentation, and then it ended up being a fireside chat. So I'm very excited to present it to everyone. But if you need any more like clarification, and most of what I'm talking about today is all in that test plan Confluence page, so it's a good source to refer to afterwards. So test plans. Most of you probably know what a test plan is, but just to start out, what is a test plan? So a test plan is a step-by-step process or guide that really explains to a hacker how to go about testing a program. So where should you start, what to look for, how to really start hacking and to sign on to the program. And a test plan varies a lot. So it depends on the type of assets, the different testing environments, program restrictions. And a perfect test plan has absolutely no barriers to entry. So you wouldn't need any credentials or type of sign-ins and logins to get onto the program. However, there's never a perfect program. So there's always certain things that you're going to need to work around. That being said, the concept of a test plan is a very broad term. So there's a lot that could fall in the name test plan. There's so many different types. So there could be a treasure map, which explains the assets, what they do, what type of code there is. There's also documentation for a platform, test credentials, restrictions that a person might face when they're trying to sign onto the program, and then how to go around these restrictions. Stuff like that all fits in the name test plan, but they're all very different. So it really is specific to the program itself and what type of barriers might be in the way there. And with that, why is a test plan important? So why would a company really want to make a test plan? It ensures to hackers that they will have the easiest possible experience hacking. And the goal is to create as a smooth and seamless experience for every hacker. So really the ultimate goal is that the easier it is to start hacking, the more engaged hackers will be in the program. So how I think of it is a customer provides a hacker with a test plan, and in turn, a hacker is able to give the maximum number of reports back to the customer. So the whole goal of creating a HackerOne program is to find your bugs, so they could find the most bugs possible with a test plan. So just a quick little comparison here to just talk about different test plans. I'm comparing WordPress and Augur. So they're actually both open source programs, which is really cool. So what open source is it's when you have your code, so all of the code that's used to build the program released under a license to the public. So normal programs, the code's part of the company, and you have to have very special permissions and are normally working at the company to actually look at the code that creates the software. And when it's open source, you use different licenses, but in general, you're able to manipulate the source code for the program a lot more and have a lot more access to it. However, there's a big difference between WordPress and Augur, because while they both are open source, WordPress doesn't need a test plan. They have easy access globally, and with their open source code, there's really good documentation, unlimited credentials, all of that type of sort of jazz, that really you could just start up a web page and a blog as easy as you want. In It's different for Augur. Augur is a blockchain company or helps make blockchains. I was a little confused with it, but they have an extremely detailed test plan. This is actually their documentation right here. It looks like a scientific report from that I have to read for college. But basically, you have to connect to an Augur node and use different blockchain things and the codes in GitHub. And in general, it's just a little bit confusing. So if Augur didn't provide as detailed as a test plan as they did, the hackers would have a really hard time getting started up. So with that, why is this playbook or the test plans really important to HackerOne in general? I'd say the ultimate reason why a test plan is so imperative is that it's a core part of all HackerOne programs. For program ops, KPI 1, which is boosting programs with low report volume, is crucial. So it's the ultimate goal of every program to get as many reports as possible and as many valid bugs as possible. So a test plan helps ensure that. It also is a good place to consolidate all the knowledge. So really how I worked on this test plan playbook and then later this presentation was through a lot of help from outside people. So I have to give big thanks to Bill and John and Adam who helped me really learn a lot about test plans. And then I also did some outside research and then also the PM. So it was a lot of just putting the knowledge all in one place and all the best practices and skills. So how do you identify the time is right? Essentially, it's ideal to have your test plan all ready to go before the launch date. So a test plan should be, normally it's found on the security page, or there's a link to a blog post or something somewhere else that is linked to the security page normally that kind of details their test plan. However, there is always the case that the test plan is not thought, they didn't think it would be necessary or they didn't have time to make it. And the reason you know that a test plan is needed and it might not be in the program at the moment is essentially everything's looking good, but the program is still receiving minimal reports. So they have a competitive bounty structure, a really well-developed security page. They have good SLA times, but they're still not receiving a lot of reports. Another way to see if a test plan is needed is through the hacker feedback dashboard. So in Looker, there's a graph that you can see on the right here that kind of shows all the invitation reject reasons. So if the reject reasons are primarily focused on owner setup, specialization, clarity, or small scope, normally it's the test plan that's causing those reject reasons. And a test plan would be really helpful in this case. So with that, how do you talk to customers about it? Before you start, it's important to do a little research on your own first. So before a kickoff call or even a sales pitch or something, it's important to physically click through the platform. What type of sign-ins do they require? What restrictions are there? Do you need a social security number, a credit card, things like that you'd want to bring up and talk about with the customer before you start. Other questions to ask at the beginning would be, what are the different types of user permissions needed? Do you need to plug into other systems? There's a lot of questions that go with mobile apps pertaining to test plans, stuff like that the customer will know a lot about and you might want to clarify before you even start. With that, there's also another very tricky question to answer that a lot of customers may ask, or even you might be thinking now, and it's, why do you actually need a test plan? If a customer is paying a hacker a bounty, normally a significant bounty, to find their bugs, shouldn't they already know what to do? They shouldn't need these set of instructions to go about hacking? Well, there's many different answers to this. The main answer that I think is most important to emphasize is really to put it in perspective. The hackers on the HackerOne platform, the white hat hackers, the good guys, are very busy people. They are hacking on multiple HackerOne platforms. Normally they have a job outside of this, or they're in school and they're just using HackerOne as either a side job or just for fun. And they can't devote all their time just to this specific program. Normally is the case. In comparison, the bad guys, the black hat hackers, have unlimited amount of time and also an unlimited amount of resources. So they can be using really powerful tools and things that might even hurt the program that a white hat hacker doesn't really have the option or the resources to use. So by providing the HackerOne hackers with a test plan, it kind of gives them the easiest and helps them out as much as possible to find these bugs without having in the most efficient manner possible. On top of that, a hacker doesn't know the testing environment as well as the company does, and rightfully so, I hope. If a program is really complex with like a lot of assets, providing a test plan kind of gives a hacker a view into what the company's looking for. So where do they want them to start? What to really like dig around on, stuff like that. And also, as I stated before, the whole goal of a HackerOne program is to receive as many reports as possible. So if it's super tricky to sign up, a test plan will really help because it increases the report volume as much as possible for the company as a whole. With that, sorry, I've been talking a lot. Does anyone have any like questions, concerns, stuff like that? All good?
I have a question.
Yes.
Does anybody on the call have an example of a situation where they're with a customer and you're having this conversation? They're like, we don't need to tell them anything. Like, they should just figure it out. Does anybody have any stories or examples of that?
Should we be saying explicit customer names because this is recorded?
You don't have to put the customer name. That's fine.
Yeah, so I had one where it was a very focused assessment. They found some black hat hackers that were doing some bad things on their network, and they wanted to try and bring in some white hat hackers to do the same thing. And I was like, great, can we get them credentials to some of the affected systems? And they're like, well, the black hat hackers don't need those. They're just, they find credentials anywhere on the internet. And I had to do a course in 2 verses on, well, that's true. These are ethical hackers, and they don't like to take random people's usernames and passwords and run around the internet with them. So, yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, perfect example.
Happens pretty commonly also is the customer is just like, oh, it's really easy. Like, they'll figure out how to do it because they work in their systems all the time and don't realize that someone who's never seen it before might not have the same knowledge.
Yeah, it's really hard to, I could just imagine it's really hard to like explain to a company that like it takes people like the customer will go through an onboarding process to learn their program and understand how it works. Whereas like a hacker has 15 minutes to like read up on the program and learn what the company does. So it's a big difference. Okay, with that, I'll keep going. So really what to do. So we talked a lot about how to bring it up to the hacker, what type of questions might be asked, what really is a test plan. But I have just like a few slides that list kind of like best practices, recommendations, stuff like that, that is common throughout a lot of different test plans. So the first thing to talk about is to consider testing restrictions. So there's so many different type of restrictions that might arise on a program or on a person's platform. And some of them are very simple and easy to go around, and then other ones are a lot more complex. So for example, phone numbers. If a lot of the hackers come from different parts of the world, so phone numbers might not be like American phone numbers. So to generate a phone number, you could just use Google Voice, and normally the hacker should do that. The company doesn't have to specify this. They should be able to do something like that. Something that might be a trickier like restriction that might come up is if a program has a really large technical complexity with really funky code and there's no documentation whatsoever. So in that type of like restriction that would arise, it would be really helpful for the company to come up with really meaningful documentation that helps the company or helps the hackers out. But that type of restriction is something that takes a lot of time and resources. So it's really all relative of how much, how invested the company is to their HackerOne platform. Another thing to talk about is credentials. There's 2 major best practices when you talk about credentials. The first one is to issue multiple credentials. So it's best practice to issue at least 2 sets of credentials for every user level you want a hacker to test on. So 2 lower level user credentials, 2 admin credentials, stuff like that. And this may seem a bit much, but in many cases, it's very helpful to validate a finding by being able to reference accounts at every privilege level. So overall, you get more comprehensive and accurate testing. So to actually bring it back to last week's Fireside Chat, when John was talking about IDORs, let's say, for example, a hacker has only one low-level user account, but they think they could update another user's account via an IDOR, so an indirect object reference. They'd have no way to verify that they were able to uncover this vulnerability because they don't even have access to the other user's account to check that they were able to do this hack or find the bug. So this kind of saves a step for both the hacker and the company, because instead of the hacker having to reach out to the company, ask them for another account and another set of credentials to be able to use another account to prove that they were able to find this vulnerability, it kind of goes around that whole process by just giving out 2 credentials at the beginning. Another thing to talk about is to not share credentials. So it could be really tempting to just set up one set of credentials, a username and a password for all hackers to authenticate and start using their program with. However, there's a lot of problems that arise with this that might not seem really obvious at the beginning, but the more you think about it, the clearer it becomes. So just like a really quick example, you have 5 different hackers and they're all sharing the same type of login. Hacker 1 logs in, number 1, and they look around the platform, try to find some vulnerabilities, and in the process, they change the password. Hackers 2, 3, 4, and 5 then can't sign into the platform at all because they don't know the new password that first hacker changed it to. So now the program's stuck. All the remaining hackers will take their times and skills to another program, and in turn, they only had 1 hacker really digging around on their platform instead of the 5 that they thought were going to go about and research their program and stuff. With that, another thing to talk about is just providing as much supplemental information as possible. So we kind of talked about this a little before already, but it's really just like a question and answer. If you think maybe as a PM or sales or whatever position you're coming from, if I knew nothing about this program and the bounty is all the information you have to go off of, is it enough to be a successful tester? So if the answer is no, there's not enough information, I don't know where to start, what to look at, how to really set up their program, this is when a test plan is really necessary. So solutions to this would be, do you need API documentation, a setup guide, specific credit cards and credentials and things that just might go help the testing be easier overall? That's really the biggest question to ask when you're creating a test plan or thinking if a test plan might be necessary. And then another thing to talk about for test plans is really what is the proper testing environment. There's 2 different types of environments that hacking normally happens on, staging or production. The reason a staging environment, so a staging environment is not live. It's supposed to mimic the live platform as much as possible, yet not be connected to the internet and not have any really real information. So the reason a staging environment would be used would be for various reasons. The first one would be if the company is really unable to create and distribute the necessary set of credentials that the hackers would need to use their platform. So this would be, they could use completely fake credentials. None of it has to be true, but there would be really no repercussions because it's not the live platform. Another reason you'd use staging would be if the program doesn't think they could handle all the traffic of having a bunch of hackers on their platform. So this would be a way to, like, if there's a lot of like activity going on their platform and they're worried they just physically are not going to be able to keep running with all of these hackers digging around. This is another way to go around that. Also, if they're worried about a sensitive data, so if it's a program with a lot of sensitive data from their customers and they don't want that being leaked at all, even to the white hat hackers or the hackers on HackerOne, staging is another solution for that. And last but not least, I'd say probably the most common I would think about would be if they want to test the absolute latest application. So a lot of times, a company might have a new feature that they want to release, but they don't want to release it live yet without having hackers come in and test it for bugs. So staging is a way to be able to release the absolute latest application without making it live. So kind of like the beta version. The other means of testing would be in the production environment. So this is the live thing if you signed on the internet and found it online. So basically, the two big reasons why production might be used would be if there's limited resources. So a company doesn't even have the means to maintain a separate instance for testing because staging does take a bit of time to set up. And then the other reason would be if they have an extremely large scope and want all of their assets tested, even the ones that extend to different programs. It's really impossible to set up a staging environment with with an extremely large scope that reaches farther than their platform themselves. With that being said, when it's the option of which staging environment to use, it's always good to use the production environment. And there's two major reasons for this, because it is really real world and real time. The two reasons are bugs can arise in the production staging environment or production environment that wouldn't arise in the staging environment. So you could be testing and staging, but you'll never even find bugs that would be in production. So in general, the program wouldn't be as secure. And the other way around, it could be bugs can arise in staging that the company will pay out for and give bounties to hackers that wouldn't even show up in the production environment. So they really would just be wasting their money because it wouldn't show up in the real case. So those are kind of the two different platforms that are used. With that, just a few quick examples. Uber does a treasure map. It's really cool. This is their original treasure map, and they released a second one a little while back. But this treasure map concept's also used in other companies on HackerOne. Slack has something like it, and I'm pretty sure Yelp has something like it also. And it basically just lists the different assets, what it does, what to look for, what it runs on, stuff like that. And it makes it really clear to a hacker what the company is looking for. And then some other test plans are things like JW Player, where they kind of similar to what Uber does, but they list all their assets and kind of what languages they're running on. There's also like MedChat, how they release their credentials. They do it through like a request form. And then there's also ServiceNow gives some really good documentation and stuff for their hackers. So these are just some other ways test plans are shown on the HackerOne security pages. And then last but not least, how do you really know if it works? So the company, you decided that they do need a test plan. How do you measure if the success of the test plan later on? The key way to measure it is if there's just an increased number of reports overall. So hopefully now the company might be meeting KPI 1. Another way to measure it is if more hackers are accepting invitations, and of those invitations that are being rejected, of course, this is only for private programs, it's not because of the 4 things I mentioned before. So owner, setup, specialization, small scope, or clarity. That's really like the main reasons to know if it worked. And with that, thank you. I couldn't have done this presentation without a lot of different people and a lot of different help. So thanks for everything. And also, this is the end of my internship, so just a big thank you for that also. I had a great time. And with that, any questions? Sweet.
Good job.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yay. Awesome. I will stop sharing. Yay. Cool. Thanks for listening, guys.
Thank you.
Cool.
Thanks, Sam.
Do I need to do something to end the recording, or is that you, Adam?
I think if you recall, it should just go ahead.
Awesome.
Email.
Cool. Bye, guys.
Take care.
Bye.